my mic on? Yes, it is. Good. Good morning. I am Mother Stephanie. You see me in the program. And I wanted to give you a little welcome to St. Luke's Episcopal Church. It is appropriate that we celebrate the fourth. This actually is our fourth annual July 4th hymn sing. It's appropriate because the parent of the Episcopal Church was the Church of England. Nearly all of the founding fathers were members of the Church of England. But after the Revolution, the Church of England in America was unable to ordain bishops because they wouldn't pledge fealty or loyalty to the King of England. And so the church freed itself of subservience to the Church of England and became the Protestant Episcopal Church in the USA. Our liturgies are still similar, theology and polity. We still believe in the middle way. And much of our architecture, like this grand cathedral-style church, is informed by English architecture. I want to thank you for making this celebration truly remarkable by your presence. I want to give you some points of housekeeping. The restrooms are through two sets of double doors, and the men's room, you'll run smack into it if you keep going, and the ladies' room is just on the right. So if that's something you need. There is a carnival for any little ones who are here and would like to go downstairs and enjoy that. I also want to make a couple of program notes. One of our readers is not able, well, two of our readers are not able to be here today. So Susan B. Anthony's speech will be done by Anita Jo Linhart. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt's speech will be done by John Ross. We're going to go straight through the program without too many interruptions from me, for sure. I wanted to point out that you have music in the middle of your bulletin. Pay no attention to the hymn numbers at the top corner because we're going to sing them in the order that they're in. If you look in your bulletin then, or your program, everywhere it says hymn, that's your job. We're all celebrating, but every time it says hymn, I'm going to ask everybody to stand and we're all going to sing these wonderful hymns. That's why it's called a hymn sing. I also wanted to ask, just after the women's suffrage poem, and you'll notice that poem, so I don't have to say anything more about that. But right after that, we're going to look at the armed forces, an appreciation for the armed forces. If you have served or are serving now in the armed forces, and you happen to hear the song that speaks to your branch of service, I ask you to stand up. Now, some people may be shy and think it's a fearful thing to stand up in a church. But honestly, if you pledge to give your life for your country, you can stand up in a church. So if we're singing the caissons, all of you folks in the Army, Air Corps, or the Army, back in my dad's day, it was the Army Air Corps, before it became the Air Force, and then it was the Army. But now we have also the Air Force hymn, and the Navy hymn, and Coast Guard hymn, and anyway, there's lots of hymns. So you listen for yours, stand up, and if you would, just stay standing, if you wouldn't mind. And at the end of the piece, we'll all sing Eternal Almighty Father, strong to save. Those are the only notes I have so far. So let us begin with the posting of the colors. No, God of our fathers. Please stand for the first hymn.
everybody remain standing. The color guard will present the flags, and it is presented by an Eagle Scout and a very young Girl Scout. Forward march. Post colors. And if everybody would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the United States
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
An excerpt from Patrick Henry's Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech delivered March 23rd, 1775. Mr. President, it is natural to man to indulge in the illusions of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth and listen to the song of that siren till she transforms us into beasts. Is this the part of wise men engaged in a great and arduous struggle for liberty? I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging of the future, but by the past. Do not allow yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition comports with those warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our land. Are fleets and armies necessary to a work of love and reconciliation? Let us not deceive ourselves, sir. These are the implements of war and subjugation. They are meant for us. They can be meant for no other. And what have we to oppose them? Shall we try argument? Sir, we have been trying that for the last 10 years. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne. There is no longer any room for hope. If we wish to be free and appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left us. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. Sir, we are not weak if we make a proper use of those means which the God of nature hath placed in our power. The millions of people armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a country as that we possess, are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations and who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, the active, the brave. There is no retreat, but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. Why stand we here idle? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death.
Excerpts from a poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, known as The Landlord's Tale, but better known as Paul Revere's Ride. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere on the 18th of April in 75. Hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, "If the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. 1, if by land, 2, if by sea. And I, on the opposite shore, will be ready to ride and spread the alarm." Then he said, "Good night," and with muffled oar silently rowed to the Charlestown shore. Meanwhile, his friend, through alley and street, wanders and watches with eager ears till, in the silence, around him he hears the muster of men at the barrack door, the sound of arms, and the tramp of feet. Then he climbed the tower of the old North Church by the wooden stairs with stealthy tread to the belfry chamber overhead and startled the pigeons from their perch on somber rafters that round him made masses and moving shapes of shade. Meanwhile, impatient to mount and ride, booted and spurred with a heavy stride on the opposite shore, walked Paul Revere. Now he patted his horse's side, now he gazed at the landscape far and near, but mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of the old North Church as it rose above the graves on the hill, lonely and spectral and somber and still. And lo, as he looks on the belfry's height, a glimmer, and then a gleam of light. He springs to the saddle, and the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes till, full in his sight, a second lamp in the belfry burns. That was all, and yet, through the gloom and the light, the fate of a nation was riding that night. And the spark struck out by that steed in his flight kindled the land into a flame with its heat. It was 2 by the village clock when he came to the bridge at Concord town. He heard the beating of the flock and the twitter of birds among the trees and felt the breath of the morning breeze blowing over the meadows brown. And one was safe and asleep in his bed who, at the bridge, would be first to fall, who that day would be lying dead, pierced by a British musket ball. You know the rest. In the books you have read how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall, and chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again under the trees at the turn of the road, and pausing only to fire and load. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm. A cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For, born on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere.
George Washington, famous and highly revered for how he wore a general's cloak and authority in the Revolution, now stood, 1789, in civilian garb to give the very first speech of inauguration of a presider, not of a general, not of a king. His new clothes would set the tone for the fabric of the leadership of the presidency of the new republic. His inaugural address, 1789. Fellow citizens of the Senate and the House of Representatives, it would be peculiar and improper to omit in this first official act my fervent supplications to the Almighty Being, who rules over our universe, who presides over the Council of Nations, and whose providential aids can supply every human defect. No people can be bound to acknowledge and adore the invisible hand which conducts the affairs much more than the people of these United States. Every step by which they have advanced to the character of an independent nation seems to have been distinguished by some token of a providential agency. By the article establishing the executive department, it is made the duty of the President to recommend to your consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. I dwell on this prospect with every satisfaction, with an ardent love for my country that can be inspired, since there is no truth more thoroughly established than there exists in the economy and course of nature an indissoluble union between virtue and happiness, between duty and advantage, between the genuine maxims of an honest and a magnanimous policy and the solid rewards of public prosperity and felicity. So also, propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right which heaven itself has ordained. The preservation of the sacred fire of liberty and the destiny of the Republican model of government are finally staked on this experiment entrusted to the hands of the American people. I assure myself that while you carefully avoid every alteration of our Constitution which might endanger the benefits of a united and effective government, or which ought to await the future lessons of experience, a reverence for the characteristic rights, a reverence for freedom, and a regard for the public harmony will sufficiently influence all your deliberations. The preceding observations, I have one to add. It concerns myself, and I will therefore be as brief as possible. When I was first honored with a call into the service of my country, then on the eve of an arduous struggle for its liberties, the light in which I contemplated my duty required that I should renounce every monetary compensation. From this resolution, I have in no instance departed. I must accordingly pray that the pecuniary estimates for the station in which I am placed may, during my continuance in it, be limited to such actual expenditures as the public good may be thought to require, having thus imparted to you my sentiments, as they have been awakened by the occasion which brings us together. I shall take my present leave, not without resorting once more to the benign parent of the human race, in humble supplication that since he has been pleased to favor the American people with a uniquely new form of government for the security of their union and the advancement of their happiness, so his divine blessing may be equally conspicuous in the enlarged views, temperate consultations, and the wise measures on which the success of this government must depend.
The first and final stanzas of Concord hymn, written by Ralph Waldo Emerson in 1837 for the dedication of an obelisk monument in Concord, Massachusetts, to commemorate the Battle of Concord, the second in a series of battles and skirmishes on April 19th, 1775. By the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag to April's breeze unfurled. Here once the embattled farmers stood and fired the shot heard round the world. Spirit that made those heroes dare to die and leave their children free, bid time and nature gently spare the shaft we raise to them and thee.
Please stand to sing. Our hymn is O Columbia, Gem of the Ocean.
This is an excerpt from an oration delivered by Frederick Douglass on July 5th, 1852, in Corinthian Hall, Rochester, New York. And it's entitled, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." Mr. President, friends, fellow citizens, the paper and placards say that I am to deliver a 4th of July oration. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable. That I am here today is to me a matter of astonishment as well as of gratitude. This is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. You were under the British Crown. That government did, in the exercise of its parental prerogatives, impose upon its colonial children such restraints, burdens, and limitations as, in its judgment, it deemed wise, right, and proper. But your fathers went so far as to pronounce the measures of government unjust, unreasonable, and oppressive, and altogether such as ought not to be quietly submitted to. There was a time when to pronounce against England and in favor of the cause of the colonies tried men's souls. To side with the right against the wrong, with the weak against the strong, and with the oppressed against the oppressor, here lies the merit. Your fathers were wise men. They felt themselves the victims of a grievous wrong. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. The idea of total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, much more so than we, at this distant time, regard it. The timid and prudent of that day were, of course, shocked and alarmed by it. These people were called Tories. Their opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful. But the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it. On the 2nd of July, 1776, the old Continental Congress clothed the idea with all the authority of national sanction. Quote, resolved that these united colonies are of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all alliances to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be dissolved, unquote. They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. Fellow citizens, I am not lacking in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men, too, great enough to give fame to a great age. It does not often happen at one time to raise such a number of truly great men. They love their country better than their own interests, a rare virtue that ought to command respect. Your fathers, quote, staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, unquote, on the cause of their country. In their admiration for liberty, they lost sight of all other interests. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future. Fully appreciating the hardship to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, reverently appealing to heaven to attest to their sincerity, soundly comprehending the solemn responsibility that they were about to assume, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them, your fathers, the fathers of this republic, did most deliberately, under the inspiration of a glorious patriotism, and with a sublime faith in the great principles of justice and freedom, lay deep the cornerstone of the national superstructure, which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you. Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary. Prayers are made, hymns are sung, and sermons are preached in honor of this day. All the hills, valleys, and mountains bespeak the occasion, one of thrilling and universal interest, a nation's jubilee. My business, if I have any here today, is with the present, the accepted time with God, and his cause is the ever-living now. Fellow citizens, allow me to ask, what have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is constantly the victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty, an unholy license. Your national greatness, swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants, impudent. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parades and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States. Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is today in active operation. In the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highways of the South. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on the way to slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, and swine, knocked off to the highest bidder. There I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lust, the caprice, and rapacity of the buyers and sellers of men. My soul sickens at the sight. Is this the land your fathers loved, the freedom which they toiled to win? Is this the earth whereupon they moved? Are these the graves they slumber in? And the churches of this country is not only indifferent to the wrongs of the slave, it actually takes sides with the oppressors. Many of the most eloquent divines who stand at the very lights of the church have shamelessly given sanction of religion and the Bible to the whole slave system. Welcome infidelity. Welcome atheism. Welcome anything in the presence of a gospel as preached by those divines. They convert the very name of religion into an engine of tyranny. It is a religion for oppressors, tyrants, man-stealers, and thugs. It is not that, quote, pure and undefiled religion, which is from above and which is first pure, then peaceable, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy, unquote. It is a religion which says to the man in chains, stay there, and to the oppressor, oppress on. In the language of Isaiah, your hands are full of blood. Cease to do evil, learn to do well, seek judgment, relieve the oppressed, judge the fatherless, plead for the widow. Albert Barnes uttered this common sense, quote, there is no power out of the church that could sustain slavery an hour if it were not sustained within the church, unquote. Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast of your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while the whole political power of the nation, as embodied in the two great political parties, is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 million of your countrymen. You are all on fire at the mention of liberty for France or for Ireland, but are as cold as an iceberg at the thought of liberty for the enslaved of America. You declare to the world that you, quote, hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, unquote. And yet, you hold 1/7 part of the inhabitants of your country in a bondage which, according to your Thomas Jefferson, quote, is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose, unquote. Now take the Constitution according to its plain reading, and I defy the presentation of a single pro-slavery clause in it. On the other hand, it will be found to contain principles and purposes entirely hostile to the existence of slavery. In conclusion, drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, my spirit is cheered by the tendencies of the age. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of the globe. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly heard on the other. The fiat the fiat of the Almighty, let there be light, has not yet spent its force. No abuse can hide itself from the all-pervading light. In the aspiration of William Lloyd Garrison, let every heart join in saying, Godspeed the year of Jubilee, the wide world o'er, when from their galling chains set free, the oppressed shall vilely bend the knee, and wear the yoke of tyranny like brutes no more. That year will come, and freedom's reign to man his plundered rights again restore. Godspeed the day when human blood shall cease to flow, and every clime be understood, the claims of human brotherhood, and each return for evil good, not blow for blow. That day will come, all feuds to end, and change into a faithful friend each foe. Thank you.
Now please stand and let us sing, Lift Every Voice.
Lift
Susan B. Anthony on women's right to vote. In the 1800s, women in the United States had few legal rights and did not have the right to vote. This speech was given by Susan B. Anthony after her arrest for casting an illegal vote in the presidential election of 1872. She was tried and then fined $100, but refused to pay. Friends and fellow citizens, I stand before you tonight under the indictment for the alleged crime of having voted at the last presidential election without having a lawful right to vote. In thus voting, I not only committed no crime, but instead simply exercised my citizens' rights guaranteed to me and all United States citizens by the national Constitution, beyond the power of any state to deny. The preamble of the federal Constitution says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." It was we, the people, not we, the white male citizens, nor yet we, the male citizens, but we, the whole people, who formed the Union, and we formed it not to give the blessings of liberty, but to secure them, not to the half of ourselves and the half of our posterity, but to the whole people, women as well as men. And it is a downright mockery to talk to women of their enjoyment of the blessings of liberty while they are denied the use of the only means of securing them provided by this democratic Republican government, the ballot. For any state to make sex a qualification that must ever result in the disfranchisement of one entire half of the people is to pass a bill of attainder, or an ex post facto law, and is therefore a violation of the supreme law of the land. By it, the blessings of liberty are forever withheld from women and their female posterity. To them, this government has no just powers derived from the consent of the governed. To them, this government is not a democracy. It is not a republic. It is an odious aristocracy, a hateful oligarchy of sex. But this oligarchy of sex, which makes father, brothers, husband, sons the oligarchs over the mother and sisters, the wife and daughters of every household, which ordains all men sovereigns, all women subjects, carries dissension, discord, and rebellion into every home of the nation. Webster, Worcester, and Bouvier all define a citizen to be a person in the United States, entitled to vote and hold office. The only question left to be settled now is, are women persons And I hardly believe any of our opponents will have the fortitude to say they are not. Being persons, then, women are citizens, and no state has a right to make any law or to enforce any old law that shall abridge their privileges or immunities. Hence, every discrimination against women in the constitutions and laws of the several states is today null and void, precisely as is every one against Negroes.
I am reading an abbreviated version of the poem Women Do Not Want It by Charlotte Perkins Stetson Gilman. When the women suffrage argument first stood upon its legs, they answered it with cabbages. They answered it with eggs. We were told of disabilities, a long array of these, till one could think that womanhood was merely a disease. They would not hear the reason. They would not fairly yield. They would not own their arguments, were beaten in the field. But time passed on, and some way, we need not ask them how. Whatever ails those arguments, we do not hear them now. You may talk of suffrage now with an educated man, and he agrees with all you say as sweetly as he can. It would be better for us all, of course, if womanhood was free. But the women do not want it, and so it must not be. 'Tis such a tender thoughtfulness, so exquisite a care, not to pile on our frail shoulders what we do not wish to bear. But, oh, most generous brother, let us look a little more. Have we women always wanted what you gave to us before? Did we ask for veils and harems in the Oriental races? Did we beseech to be unclean, shut out of sacred places? Did we beg for scolding bridles and ducking stools to come, and clamor for the beating stick no fitter than your thumb? Did we ask to be forbidden from all the trades that pay? Did we claim the lower wages for a man's full work today? Have we petitioned for the laws wherein our own shame is shown, that not a woman's child, not even her body, is her own?
The United States Army. United States Marines. The United States Navy. The United States Coast Guard. The United States Air Force.
Please stand now, and we're going to sing Almighty Father, Strong to Save. And it's fun to recognize all the different branches of the armed forces. But I also want to mention some of those occupations that were so critical that people couldn't serve across the sea because they had to serve here. Those people who worked in transportation, that was extremely important. The railroad was extremely important. People who farmed the soil, that job was incredibly important. People who manned the pipelines. There's so many different areas of this country's provision for the men who went overseas that honestly, if I were to cover them all, everyone would be standing. So now let us sing Almighty Father, strong to save.
These are excerpts from Franklin D. Roosevelt's State of the Union Address on January 6, 1941, The Four Freedoms. I suppose that every realist knows that the democratic way of life is at this moment being directly assailed in every part of the world, assailed either by arms or by secret spreading of poisonous propaganda by those who seek to destroy unity and promote discord in nations that are still at peace. No realistic American can expect from a dictator's peace, international generosity, or return of true independence, or world disarmament, or freedom of expression, or freedom of religion, or even good business. Such a peace would bring no security for us, for our neighbors, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. As a nation, we may take pride in the fact that we are soft-hearted, but we cannot afford to be soft-headed. We must always be wary of those with sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal preach the ism of appeasement. We must especially be aware the small group of selfish men who would clip the wings of the American eagle in order to feather their own nests. Just as our national policy in internal affairs has been based upon a decent respect for the rights and the dignity of all our fellow men within our gates, so our national policy in foreign affairs has been based on a decent respect for the rights and the dignity of all nations, large and small. And the justice of morality must win in the end. We are committed to all-inclusive national defense. We are committed to full support of all those resolute people everywhere who are resisting aggression and are thereby keeping war away from our hemisphere. By this support, we express our determination that the democratic cause shall prevail. We are committed to the proposition that principles of morality and considerations for our own security will never permit us to acquiesce in a peace dictated by aggressors and sponsored by appeasers. We know that enduring peace cannot be bought at the cost of other people's freedom. Let us say to the democracies, we Americans are vitally concerned in your defense of freedom. We are putting forth our energies, our resources, and our organizing powers to give you the strength to regain and maintain a free world. We shall send you in ever-increasing numbers, ships, planes, tanks, guns. This is our purpose and our pledge. In fulfillment of this purpose, we will not be intimidated by the threats of dictators, that they will regard us as a breach of international law or as an act of war, our aid to the democracies which dare to resist their aggression. Such aid is not an act of war, even if a dictator should unilaterally proclaim it to be so. This nation has placed its destiny in the hands and heads and hearts of its millions of free men and women, and its faith and freedom under the guidance of God. Freedom means the supremacy of human rights everywhere. Our support goes to those who struggle to gain those rights and keep them. Our strength is our unity and purpose. To that high concept, there can be no end, save victory.
Let us now sing America the Beautiful.
Excerpts from John F. Kennedy's inaugural address, given January 20th, 1961. We observe today not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom, symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, signifying renewal as well as change. For I have sworn before you and Almighty God the same solemn oath our forebears prescribed nearly a century and 3/4 ago. The world is very different now, for man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. And yet the same revolutionary beliefs for which our forebears fought are still at issue around the globe. The belief that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. We dare not forget today that we are the heirs of that first revolution. Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans. Born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed and to which we are committed today at home and around the world. Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty. Now the trumpet summons us again, not as a call to bear arms, but a call to struggle against the common enemies of man: tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it, and the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man. With a good conscience, our only sure reward, with history, the final judge of our deeds, let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking his blessing and his help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own.
Excerpts from President Ronald Reagan's remarks at the Brandenburg Gate in West Berlin on June 12, 1987. 24 years ago, President John F. Kennedy visited Berlin, speaking to the people of this city and the world at the City Hall. We come to Berlin, we American presidents, because it is our duty to speak in this place of freedom. I extend my warmest greetings and goodwill of the American people. To those listening in East Berlin, a special word. Although I cannot be with you, I address my remarks to you just as surely as to those standing here before me, for I join you as I join your fellow countrymen in the West in this firm, this unalterable belief. Es gibt nur ein Berlin. There is only one Berlin. Behind me stands a wall that encircles the free sectors of this city, part of a vast system of barriers that divide the entire continent of Europe. It is here in Berlin, cut in across your city, where the news, photos, and the television screen have imprinted this brutal division of a continent upon the mind of the world. Standing before the Brandenburg Gate, every man is a Berliner, forced to look upon a scar. As long as this gate is closed, as long as this scar of a wall is permitted to stand, it is not the German question alone that remains open, but the question of freedom for all mankind. In this season of spring in 1945, the people of Berlin emerged from their air raid shelters to find devastation. Speaking precisely 40 years ago this month, George Marshall, United States Secretary of State, said, "Our policy is directed not against any country or doctrine, but against hunger, poverty, desperation, and chaos." I saw a display commemorating the 40th anniversary of the Marshall Plan. I understand that Berliners of my own generation can remember seeing signs dotted through the western sectors of the city. The sign read simply, "The Marshall Plan is helping here to strengthen the free world." Working together for a strong, free world in the West, that dream became real. Japan rose from ruin to become an economic giant. Italy, France, Belgium, virtually every nation in Western Europe saw political and economic rebirth. The European community was founded. In West Germany and here in Berlin, there took place an economic miracle. Adenauer, Erhard, Reuter, and other leaders understood the practical importance of liberty, that just as truth can flourish only when the journalist is given freedom of speech, so prosperity can come about only when the farmer and the businessman enjoy economic freedom. The German leaders reduced tariffs, expanded free trade, lowered taxes. From 1950 to 1960 alone, the standard of living in West Germany and Berlin doubled. Where 4 decades ago there was rubble, today in West Berlin there is the greatest industrial output of any city in Germany. Busy office blocks, fine homes and apartments, proud avenues, and the spreading lawns of parkland. There are 2 great universities, orchestras, and an opera. Countless theaters and museums. Where there was want, today there's abundance. In the 1950s, Khrushchev predicted, "We will bury you." But in the West today, we see a free world that has achieved a level of prosperity and well-being unprecedented in all human history. Freedom leads to prosperity. There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. In Europe, only one nation and those it controls refuse to join the community of freedom. Yet in this age of redoubled economic growth, of information and innovation, the Soviet Union faces a choice. It must make a fundamental change, or it will become obsolete. As I look out a moment ago from the Reichstag, that embodiment of German unity, I noticed words crudely sprayed upon the wall, perhaps by a young Berliner. This wall will fall. Beliefs become reality. Yes, across Europe, this wall will fall. For it cannot withstand faith. It cannot withstand truth. The wall cannot withstand freedom. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Let us stand to sing America.
My country is a
be reciting The Hill We Climb, a poem by Amanda Gorman, read at President Biden's inauguration. When the day comes, we must ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country in a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished and far from pristine, but that does not mean that we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all colors, cultures, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze, not to what stands between us, but to what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our futures first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so that we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we've grieved, we've grew. That even as we've hurt, we've hoped. That even as we've tired, we've tried. That we'll forever be tied together, victorious. Not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we are to live up to our own time, then the victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise to the glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare. It's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour. But within it, we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while we once asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe, now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be. A country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation become the future. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and changes our children's birthrights. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. Every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the golden hills of the West. We will rise from the windswept Northeast where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover. In every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge, battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of the flame and unafraid. A new dawn balloons as we free it. For there is always light if we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it.
Please stand to sing our sort of benediction prayer After we sing this song, there will be the retiring of the colors. So I'll ask you to remain standing for the retiring of the colors. And then I want to let you know that for those who want to expand their 4th of July celebration here, we have some hot dogs and chips and sodas for lunch. I think we just have donation. So come and have some good old American meal. Also, there are pies. If you want to take a home-baked pie to your family event this evening, come buy a pie. Now, I've heard that Art's pie has had so many people wanting it that we're going to have to raffle that one or auction it off. Going to have to, because everybody wants his pie. It's rhubarb and mulberry. Really unusual. So I invite you to do that. Also, you might be tripping over remnants of last week's rummage sale. So if shopping is one of your American hobbies, you're welcome to browse. And buy, okay. All right. So let us now sing or pray, God Bless America. Let's retire the colors.
Retire the colors. Forward march.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the John Philip Sousa March as you make your way to the Parish Hall. Some of these notes, it's just too long.